Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Smoko podcast. My name is Alexis Armstrong, your host. Nice to meet you. The Smoko podcast is the place to celebrate and highlight women, trans women, and non binary folk working within STEM and trade occupations. So please tune in, take a break, join us. We're on Smoko. And today we are extremely lucky to be joined by the lovely Dr. Sandra Barr, who reputation precedes her. It's insane. She's a preeminent geoscientist in Atlantic Canada who has unraveled the tectonic formation of the Canadian Appalachians. She's been integral to Canadian geology and Atlantic geology. I think she has mapped nearly all of the Maritimes. And she's taught over 4,000 students. I was one of her old students at Acadia University, where she has been a professor for a very long time. And so we're going to talk about her experience working in the geoscience, her research, her experience as a professor, mapping. She is the recipient of so many awards: the Nova Scotia Science Hall of Fame, the 2021 Mentorship Medal for the Canadian Federation of Earth Sciences, and then recently the 2022 Bancroft Award by the Royal Society of Canada. Sandra, you are a living legend. It is so nice to have you on the show. It is such an honor to speak with you, and it's so nice to see you again. How are you?
I'm fine, Alexis. It's so embarrassing to hear people say all those things. It doesn't even seem like it's me, but I really appreciate it. And
um,
thanks a lot for asking me to join you.
Oh my goodness. It is you one, and I don't think you should be embarrassed. It's crazy just how much you've done, and I can't wait to kind of get into your background and your experience throughout your career. And it's such an honor to have you on the show here, and it's a personal one. It's a personal honor for me because I don't know if you know it. Maybe you do after chit chatting back and forth for this interview, but
Yeah.
you're the reason why I'm here, and you're the reason why that I went into geology. I remember one of my first geology courses when you walked in. I remember just being like, "Yep, that's it. I'm gonna be a geologist now." Like it switched, and so I just wanted to say thank you for that and to bring you onto the show. And we're gonna get into geology and kind of your reputation and the fact that you're a freaking legend. But I was wondering if we could start to maybe the very, very beginning at the University of New Brunswick back in '64 when you first went into geology. And I wanted to ask about how you discovered the field of geology and what was it about that field that you were like, yep, this is what I'm going to do.
Whoa. Sometimes it's hard to look back. It was a long time ago, but I think, like almost everybody who ends up in geology, I didn't go to university thinking I was going to be a geologist. I was kind of an athlete when I was in high school, and everybody expected that when I went to university, I'd do what was called back then physical education. But sort of at the last minute, I decided to go into science.
Mm.
And back then, what I think was a really good thing, I didn't have to pick a major in my
Oh,
first year.
amazing.
I did 6 courses. I did all the sciences, math, chemistry, biology, physics, and of course geology. And then I could do one arts course, and I picked economics. So that
Mm.
was my first year at university, 6 courses. And I liked the geology course the best. I was really intrigued by
Mm.
it. It was so clear that there were lots of things that weren't known about the earth. And I was someone who had always enjoyed being outdoors, out in the woods. And all the time when I was a kid, I was always collecting things, even a
Yeah.
few rocks along the way. And, you hear this from a lot of people who go into geology. So, for me, it was kind of luck, but in a way, kind of destiny as well. And
Mhm.
I grew up in a place where I could spend a lot of time out in the woods by myself, and I
Mhm.
really enjoyed kind of figuring out where I was and getting from one place to another and that sort of thing. So I was really kind of set up to go into geology.
Mhm.
And the prof I had, he was just a guy. He had,
A regular
you know,
person? Yeah,
a
yeah.
regular person, but he did a lot of things right. He took us on field trips, which I
Mm.
really,
Oh, that
uh,
definitely cements it. Being out in
yeah,
the
and
field, it completely cements it.
and that's why I always have done that in my own courses, that tried to do field trips, and it just seemed a natural follow on. And it helped that the geology mark was my highest one in first year, so it
And
seemed
added
like
to it.
maybe I had a kind of an aptitude for it as
Yeah.
well.
I love that answer, and that answer of like destiny, because you didn't even know that it existed, but you were already kind of a geologist in your right, whether you realized it or not.
I was certainly a natural scientist, and I had
Yeah.
that kind of curiosity for sure. The thing about collecting, I mean, my space here is full of rocks. You probably
Mine too.
remember.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, it's, yeah, there's a kind of a destiny aspect to it, I guess.
I think so. Like, I think anyone in natural sciences can resonate with that, to be like the credentials of like, I like to be outside. I like to walk around in the woods by myself. I collect bugs and like anything that I could find. You're like, yeah, that was my childhood too. Like, that was exactly the
Yeah.
same.
I used to collect
Mm,
bracket fungi, those things that grow on trees. And my mother was absolutely horrified, and I was not allowed to bring those things into the house. And my grandmother was a very supportive person, and she
mm.
gave me space in her basement, and I had my
Oh.
collections all down there. And so, yeah, that
Yeah.
was very influential.
That's very cute that she had it. We had a rule. We weren't allowed anything that was in the ocean. We weren't allowed to bring it home, because the first time we
Oh,
tried to collect like sea stars and stuff, not
oh, they
knowing that like
smell.
yeah, yeah, my mom was like, that's no, that's a collection that has to stay outside. That's not allowed to come in here. And Sandra, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about being outside and like your love of field work. And like, I guess your first professor was the one person that instilled it in you, of like the importance of taking field trips, because you're a preeminent geoscientist in Atlantic Canada. Like, you've done all of the tectonic formation of the Canadian Appalachians. You've mapped basically all of the Maritimes. You've published multiple books and over 160 publications of the geology of the Maritimes. I feel like you know it all. And when you look at a lot of your publications and a bunch of the things, it's all on mapping and fieldwork. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to that, and like your favorite aspect of mapping and fieldwork, and what's something that you like about it, what's something that's challenging.
Yeah, that's the thing that appeals to me most about geology, I guess. I find it so exciting, like
Mm.
going up a brook and, what's going to be around the next bend and what am I going to see in the next outcrop. And I just found that really, really intriguing right from the first. And I was so lucky when I came to Nova Scotia 1976, and started out at Acadia, and I was looking for something to work on, and I was given the opportunity to go to Cape Breton Island and
Mm.
map granites. And I really didn't know anything about granites because my previous experience had not focused on granites at all.
Mm.
And so there I was out looking at these rocks, and a lot of things became really apparent to me. I had no real detailed maps to go on, and I was the first person to really be describing a lot of these rocks.
Wow.
And a lot of things emerged, and I just got very interested and very excited about it. So, yeah, just the joy of looking at rocks. I know
Mhm.
people will say, "Oh, rocks, they all look the same," but they don't.
Yeah.
And
No.
they tell stories once you learn what to look for. So yeah, I really like that. The challenge, well, there's logistical
Mhm.
challenges, figuring out where you are and so on. I found that the GPS was a great invention,
Could
but
imagine, yes. Yeah.
because for the first 30 years I was working wherever I was never quite sure where I was really a lot of the
Oh
time.
my goodness. I couldn't imagine that. That's never been my experience. I could never imagine
Yeah,
that, of not
no,
knowing.
no, and a GPS was an amazing thing. I mean, it took some of the excitement out of it for sure, but certainly it was a great thing, and I think my maps became a lot better
I
after
could
that.
imagine. Yeah, like I couldn't like, would you just come out of the bush sometimes and be like, "Oh, my truck is not here. Like,
Yeah.
I am in the complete wrong place."
Well, we had aerial photographs,
Okay.
and so a few times, yeah, real shocks, but most times you had a pretty good idea of where you were and so on. But
Wow.
uh,
That's a
yes, it,
testament to you because I know what those aerial photographs look like, Sandra. You made us look at them. Like, we're in Canada, it's all trees. It's hard when you're on the ground to be like, is that this cedar? Like, it's
yeah, it
crazy.
is. It is very hard, and I was never very good at that. So there's that aspect of field work which I
Mm,
really liked. There's the physical challenge of it, which I found quite appealing as well because
mhm,
I was kind of athletic, and so it,
mhm,
it didn't phase me too much to do those things. But the most amazing part was the rocks themselves, because
mm.
even now, there's a lot of times when I'm in the field and I'm looking at rocks and I'm really not sure what I'm looking at. I'm working now with a graduate student in the Cobequid Highlands here in northern Nova Scotia, and those rocks are really a mystery. Until you get them back and cut them and
Yeah.
make a thin section, look at them through the microscope, it's really hard to know if it's even igneous or sedimentary.
Yeah. To be like,
You
what
know,
is it to start with? Let's start
yeah,
there, a big
and
family, and then,
and that's it's kind of like solving a mystery or whatever,
uh-huh.
detective work. Sure, experience helps, but if you can't see anything, no amount of experience really
Yeah.
helps you. So you have to kind of figure out what to do next, how to sort it out. And so
Well,
I just found all that aspect of it pretty appealing.
oh,
So
completely. I could imagine that, like Sandra, because it's like multiple levels of mystery, right? Of like, what are we going to find? One, where are we?
we
Two,
do.
before, yeah,
What is
and
it?
then what is it? And then like, how do we get it back to the truck? Once you get it back to the truck, then you actually start processing it, and then it's a whole nother level of mystery, right?
Well, there's that whole thing about carrying rocks too.
Yeah,
And, as I've gotten older, I've realized that, yeah, it really is quite challenging. I never thought about it much at the time,
yeah. It's just
but
something that you love
it
to
was
do,
just
and it was
something
interesting.
that I like
Yeah,
to do.
that you're
Yeah.
drawn to.
And of course, although I was often working alone, I had, students and colleagues that had the same kind of passion. And so
Hmm.
that makes it fun.
Oh, totally. It gives you like a little crew and a little like
Yeah.
camaraderie with it. And
Yeah.
you've done so much field work and you've done so much mapping and you do have that years of experience. I was wondering if you could kind of speak to giving some advice to people who are just starting doing field work because I know sometimes it can be a little bit uncomfortable and young people just starting are a little bit scared of it. Like what do
Yeah.
they need to know? Any advice to get more comfortable with being in the field?
Be patient. Be patient with yourself
Mm,
and honest. I mean, if you don't like it, don't do it. But, anytime you start something new, try and be patient and gradually you'll learn it. And I certainly wasn't very confident when I started out. I mean, I put on a brave face, but I wasn't always, I was working, my very first student in the field in Cape Breton Island. And
mm.
I was really nervous a lot of the time, but I tried not to let her
Oh, she
see
probably
that,
didn't know. Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
So, that's one bit of advice I would say
Mm,
is to just, try and relax and get on with it. And, I've worked with a lot of people over the years, a lot of students, and I don't know if women are more uncomfortable doing field work than men. I think women are maybe more likely to admit it and to ask for help, or
yeah.
certainly more recently in my career, I've been very aware of all this because geoscience as a profession is doing a lot of soul searching now about
Mhm.
field work and, how we're not inclusive, and, there's kind of the image of being tough and
Yes, yeah.
and it excludes a lot of people. And I mean, let's face it, there's physical differences between men and women that make it a little harder for women to handle some things in the field.
Yeah,
And
carry the same amount of weight, but it's a
right.
very, like,
And
inconstitutional thing, like, it's such a small thing, you're like, "That's only, like, 0.2% of field work."
yes,
Really? Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And but little things like having to pee in the woods is something
Mhm,
that gets a lot of attention now. And I never used to think about that, but it makes some people, women in particular, very uncomfortable. And I'm much more aware of that. And so now when I
mhm.
plan things, I make sure that there are bathroom breaks, and so especially, on field trips with a mixture of students. It's partly an awareness thing, and I guess we're all more aware of
Hmm.
these kinds of issues than we used to be. And so my main advice is to use common sense and speak up if you're really
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And
Yeah,
sometimes
maybe.
it's easier said than done. But
Yeah, for sure. But I also think too, sometimes I think what's happening right now, and what I like to see is like hopefully field work is getting a little bit demystified. Like it used to be this big thing that you had to be like tough and like
yeah,
one type of person. And you're like, that's not field work. I can do field work. It's just like
yeah,
living in the woods. Like that's
yeah.
it.
Yeah. No, there's certainly no mystique, and sometimes there's some misery, like when it rains
Yes.
on you and so
Yeah.
on. But
Yeah.
the same can be said of what advice would you give somebody who's getting into sports, into athletics, and so on.
Hmm.
There's ups and downs of good days and some days that are not so good. It's
Yeah.
just
Grit and kind of just like stick with it, and it's okay if you don't know it, and it's
it's
okay if
it's
it's
okay.
uncomfortable.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
no
Yeah.
pressure.
Completely
you
just
know,
enjoy it, have fun, look at some
yeah,
like nice
yeah.
trees.
That's it.
Uh, I do want to talk a little bit about teaching because you also do teach the field school at
Yes.
Acadia. And you started working in 1976 at Acadia University. And then I saw this crazy stat that you have taught over 4,000 students. You supervised over 100 theses. You've taught field school,
Yeah.
undergraduate, and graduate courses.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing how many people you've taught. And I mean, being one of your students, I'm just so happy that I'm part of that statistic. And I was wondering if you could speak to your favorite part of teaching, maybe something that's challenging. And then do you have a favorite thing to teach? Is it like a topic? Is it a class type? Anything.
I don't really have a favorite thing to teach, but I love my role in teaching at Acadia over the years because I teach at every level. I teach first year courses all the way through to fourth year. And so I get to see students, learning and changing as
Mhm.
they mature and become more confident. The first day of classes is always, even though I've taught first year geology
Yeah.
probably, I mean, I haven't taught it every single year since 1976 because sometimes I was on sabbatical leave or
Oh.
whatever, but I've taught it a lot of times, and it's
Yeah.
still exciting to go into that
Ah.
first class and everybody's sitting there, and you don't know anybody, but
Hmm.
everybody looks expectant and happy to be there, and maybe they're not, I don't know, but I always think, yes, these
Yeah.
it,
They are
it's
excited to be here. Mm.
yeah, it's the very beginning. And so I like first year geology because students come in, the majority of them knowing very, very little.
Hmm.
I sometimes ask students, try and get an idea of what they know. And one year I asked how many people knew what quartz was, and half the students had no idea.
Oh, I had no idea when I first started. I had never
Yeah,
taken a geology class until your class. I didn't even know geology was a thing. Had no
yeah.
idea.
No, well, I really didn't when I went to university either.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can relate to that. And,
Yeah.
I like the breadth of an introductory geology course where you're really telling people things that are pretty amazing,
Hmm.
but you're telling them for the first time. And I like that. But I also like getting into the details with honors students and graduate students, and, really trying to figure out things that nobody knows.
I
Every
can
day is
imagine
different.
that.
Every class, even though I teach those classes year after year, it's always different because the
Hmm.
students are different and their reactions are different.
I just could imagine seeing someone at the very start of their career and when they first discover something and like, because it's huge topics. It's like plate tectonics, explaining that to someone, like just watching their brain explode to be like, what do you mean there's
Yeah,
something called plate tectonics? Like it's a huge,
yeah,
huge concept. So like that would be so wonderful to see and to be able
it
to
is.
teach.
It is.
Yeah.
I just feel geology is really special in that way
Mm.
because at that level, at that introductory level, you can really tell people a lot of things that they can grasp right away. I've had so many students say, "Oh, I had no idea."
or you can
happy.
grasp right away, but it also impacts the way that you view the universe, the way that you view
Yes.
time, the way that you view space, the way that you
Yes.
view structure and solids and liquids. The first time that someone explained to me that rocks move almost as toothpaste, I think this was probably you
It
instead of
probably was. That's a
a
line.
solid. Yeah, it probably was you. That blew my mind. I was literally sitting there being like, excuse you, what? They get heated up. Like I had no concept of that. So it was just something that was so impactful. And I could see as being like an educator. And yes, every year is going to be different because you're going to have one kid freaking out over the toothpaste line, one kid's going to be freaking out at tectonics. You never really
Yeah.
know where it's going to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, but it's challenging too. And, for every student who's gets turned on and
Mm-hmm.
responds, there's more who don't, of course. And
Mm,
there's always students that you just can't engage. And yeah, some people are going to think this is fascinating, and other people are going to be bored or not like
yeah.
it. But I always, when people just disappear, I always worry a bit about
Oh,
that.
I could imagine that. I think I would be
Yeah,
in the kind of same
it's
boat.
just
Yeah, it's human nature to be like, I hope you're okay. I hope it was just that you found this boring and then it's nothing else other than
yeah,
that. Yeah, yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Well, it's so beautiful, and you've been an instructor for so long, and that's one aspect of your career. But like, Sandra, you've done so much too, because another aspect of it is research, and I was wondering if we could kind of dive into that a little bit. Is because I
Yeah.
mean, you've also done a lot of research too. Like, it's not even like it's been one type. So,
No, I'm certainly what's known as a generalist for sure. I'm not really a specialist at anything. I really
I would say you're an expert at all of the
oh
Atlantic
well,
geology.
but what I am good at is finding people to work with
Mm,
who are experts or specialists, and that's been really important through my career. The people that I've worked with
hmm.
who have provided additional insights and additional information, and those go from all the way from students right through to colleagues. I'm a
Yeah.
great collaborator. Most of my
Yeah.
publications are with other people.
I think that's the beauty of science is collaboration. I don't
Oh
think it's a one person show. I think it's a
no,
collaboration
no, it
industry. Yeah.
for sure, especially if you're trying to figure out a mountain belt like
Yeah. It's
the
too big for
Appalachians,
one
because
person.
yeah, and there's no
Yeah.
one particular type of geology that's going to answer all the questions. So you really have to have all the different kinds of information that you can possibly find out, and that's a great thing that's been happening because it grows. So the more you learn, the more
Hmm.
questions you ask, and
Yeah.
you just start building this thing. And I always kind of envisage like I'm trying to solve a puzzle,
Hmm.
but I didn't have the pieces of the puzzle to start with.
Yeah.
It wasn't given to me in a box that I could
Yeah.
just
It was like
I had
scattered
to.
throughout the woods. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I've spent 47 years, I guess, trying to identify and describe all the pieces.
Hmm.
You get a few pieces and you solve part of the puzzle, but I mean at the start you used the word that we had unraveled the
Hmm.
history. Well, we're getting there, but I, we're still unraveling,
You're missing
defining
an
the
edge
pieces.
piece. Yeah,
No,
like an edge piece is still missing. It's still out in the woods.
no, we've still got patches of the puzzle all over the place, and you'll never be finished, with jobs
Hmm.
like that.
Oh,
And so
it's too big to
you'll
finish and
never
too big
be,
for one person, I
yeah,
think.
and you'll never
Yeah.
be right about everything, but we feel that we've made a lot of progress.
Mm.
And it's been very satisfying to see that progress, because
Oh,
I know when I started out in Cape Breton Island how little was known, and I know how much we know now, and it's very gratifying. I feel
yeah.
very lucky to have been able to do all that, and
That's
not
amazing.
just me, but all
No, but
those
to be part of
hundred
it.
and
Yeah.
hundred and
60
whatever students
publications.
who
Yeah.
worked with me.
Mm.
And I do a lot of different kinds of geology, which I think is something that's fairly unique with
Hmm.
me. So I've published papers on paleontology, on fossils. I published papers on geophysics,
Mm-hmm.
offshore geophysics, on granites, on structure,
Everything,
on
really. Yeah.
everything. And so I think that's a unique aspect of
Ask. Yeah.
anybody who is trying to work on a mountain belt scale. And
Yeah.
of course, understanding the Appalachians is only part of the story because they're a mountain belt, but there's the whole rest of the world that was part of that story. So you've got the pieces within the Appalachians, but then you've got to put the Appalachians into
Into the big actual
the whole
piece of when
global
everything
picture.
was one supercontinent. Yes, exactly.
And
Yeah.
that is really fun to do. And then you need a lot of help from
Then you're
other.
looking at like cross Atlantic to be like, you guys have the
Exactly.
other piece in the UK. Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. And in fact, in May, I was on a 10-day field trip to Spain. I'm part of a project called IGCP 683, and what we're trying to do
Man,
is
we love our acronyms. We really
I
do.
know, international correlation program between Eastern North America, Africa, and Europe. And
Oh,
so,
wonderful.
but this we were looking at areas in Spain to try and see if we can recognize things that might match what we're familiar with here. So that kind of thing is really a lot of fun, and to
Oh,
interact with people from
totally.
different backgrounds is very challenging. I'm glad I'm an English speaker
Mhm.
because it always amazes me how these people can communicate in so many
Different
languages.
languages. Yeah.
And
We definitely, we're the easiest ones. We just have to do one language. That's it.
that's right,
Yeah.
because most of the literature, most of the conversations, mainly in English, and
Hmm.
people do an amazing job of managing to communicate in English. I think if I had not been born an English speaker, I would have had a tough
No,
time. I'm
I
very
agree.
impressed
Yeah, me
with
too. I'm like, I
it,
can barely speak English or scientific English. I don't know how you can speak scientific English, English, and other languages. I can't
I
believe it.
know
Yeah.
it's these people amaze me.
I love that you were able to do that. I love that you have this program, this international program to like look at the pieces of the Appalachians and really put them together. And maybe for people who aren't geologists, could you kind of go into it maybe a little bit more when we're talking about mapping the Appalachians? What are you actually researching? What are you looking for? What are you interested in? And how does
Uh,
that work? Like, do you go collect samples, bring them back? Like, for the basics for someone who's not a geologist.
yeah, okay. So we go out and look at the rocks and we try and figure out what they are. And as I already mentioned, that's pretty challenging. So you have to
Hmm.
collect samples, bring them back, look at them through the microscope, do chemical analyses, compare them to modern day rocks that are formed recently on the Earth so you can see if they're similar. And
Mountain belts are similar and they're moving in
yeah,
the
so
same
you look at
direction,
young
basically.
mountains
Yeah.
like the Himalaya or the Andes that are still having mountain building activity, to compare them to the scraps of
An old
mountain that
mountain.
we have
Yeah.
left in the Appalachians. And then you try and figure out what the history was. You need to find out the age of the rock. That can
Mm,
be pretty challenging, although
yeah.
it's less challenging now than it used to be.
Mhm,
But once you figure out the age, then you try and say, okay, what was happening 600 million years ago or 500 million years ago?
mhm,
And you just fit it into a chronological story, the same as we do with human history.
mhm.
Only with human history, we have typically more of the story preserved.
Yeah,
But
it's not as old. The Appalachians are old and eroded, and it's a little bit hard to get maybe some
there's
information of
there's
it.
and
Yeah.
we'll never have the whole story.
Mhm,
That's just reality. There's pages missing of the
mhm.
story, so it requires a lot of imagination.
Yeah.
You're taking little bits of information and trying to put them together into something coherent. The other great thing about geoscience is because there's so little information, there's more than one way to interpret it.
Mm.
And so there's always great discussions about the alternatives and which one is the more likely. And I love that to and fro
Yeah, that aspect of it, the
discussion.
duking it
Yeah,
out. Yes, yeah. And
yeah.
what is the kind of big topics that are being contested or talked about? Is it like how it's been formed? Is it the age? What are the big questions in Appalachian geology?
The biggest questions right now is how many fundamentally different fragments are in there,
Oh,
and
cool.
which ones came from South America,
Yeah.
which ones came from Africa. Some that we used to think were from South America now more likely come from Baltica,
Oh,
Scandinavia.
cool. Oh,
That's
that's
a
a new movement. That's a very
that's
big movement. That's
that's
cool.
a yes. And so all these pieces are in there, and because of their chemical characteristics, their ages, their histories of deformation and
Hmm.
metamorphism, all these things, you have to look at all of them. And some of the fundamental arguments come out to be how similar is similar,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and
What's the same is
how
different.
different is different,
Yeah.
and what matters more, similarities or
Mm.
differences. And so I think geoscientists tend to get divided into lumpers
Oh,
and
total
splitters.
splitters. Yeah.
And lumpers sort of say, well, they're all more or less the same, so let's
Hmm.
just put them all together.
I'm a
And I'm
splitter.
a dedicated
I'm
splitter.
a splitter. Probably
And
because you were a splitter. I'm a splitter.
and so, I really focus on the differences. Sure,
Yeah.
they look the same, but this one's a little bit older, and
Hmm.
and so I tend to end up with a lot of pieces in my puzzle, whereas some other people have much fewer
Yeah.
pieces, and so a compromise usually is a good idea
Is
when
the
you're
winner of
in.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you lump too much, then you just end up with
I
puzzle with
agree.
one piece, and
I
that's no
agree. I
fun.
don't think it's no fun and I don't think it's correct. I'm a
No.
I'm a true splitter. I think like I'm on the same page with it. And I have that kind of like big picture question of like how many pieces, where did they come from? Is there something right now in Appalachian and mapping them out that's a complete mystery that you have no idea what's going on, or something that's still kind of unknown? Is there anything that surprises you? Because you've been an expert of these rocks for so long. My instinct would be like nothing surprises you at this point. But is there something that's really puzzling to you that you want to dive into that aspect of the puzzle?
I'm constantly surprised and amazed at how
Mm,
much diversity we have in the geology, the rocks in Nova
mm,
Scotia and New Brunswick. Those two places where I've tended to work the most. It's just remarkable, and you can never predict.
mm.
I think I have an idea of what age things are, and then when I actually get the numbers back, it's
Totally
something
different.
quite different. So, yeah, constant surprises in ages, I think, would
Mm.
be the main thing. As far as mysteries are concerned, we have all these rocks now sitting side by side.
Mhm.
Southern Nova Scotia is one such area, sitting up against northern mainland Nova Scotia,
Mhm.
not even going to Cape Breton Island. We don't want to
Yeah, no,
go
that's a
there.
whole nother like feast
But
in
just
itself.
those two
Yeah.
parts of Nova Scotia sitting side by side now, and they're completely different. And
Mm.
so, just what's going on there? And some
Mhm.
people think that southern Nova Scotia formed on top of northern Nova Scotia
Oh,
and then got separated. But other people, among them me, think they are completely unrelated and just got
thrown
juxtaposed.
together now. Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot of really fundamental questions that are still waiting to be fully understood.
I love
So,
that. Like there's something about that. I maybe that's just like what drove me into this science, but I think there's something so beautiful of being like, oh, we have no idea. Like we're gonna keep on figuring out and there's still more things to discover. I just find that so exciting for the next generation of being like, yeah, this is a puzzle. Good luck. This is where we're at. Good luck with it.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, the question is always, why does it matter? Right? Sometimes I struggle with explaining that to people when they ask me what I do, and they sort of say, well, so what? Eh?
Hmm.
But I think you're either the kind of person who sees that it matters, or
Yeah.
you really,
Yeah.
I think,
You're not gonna get it. Either you get it or you don't. It's one of those kind of like I view
Yeah,
those as music. That's how I explain pure science as like kind of art. It's just it's
right.
beauty for discovery. That's like sometimes pure science, it is just totally about discovery, and it's a beautiful
Yes.
thing. Sandra, I wanted to ask because I think I'd be remiss if I didn't, but it's a lofty question. It's definitely a lofty question. I was wondering if you could speak to how it's changed because you've been in geology for a long time. Has there been a big shift or something that really sticks out to you that has changed since you first started your career till now?
Yeah, well, there's things about the science, which
Yeah.
I'll get to in a sec, but I mean, I have to say the most obvious change in my career has been in the number of women in
Mhm.
in geoscience. So when I started out, I was certainly the only female in my graduating class, and when I went to graduate school, I was the only female in
Mhm.
50 graduate students, and
Wow.
I can't say I was the first female professor at a Canadian university, but I was certainly among the first. There might have been two
Wow.
or three
Others
before me.
before. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's still
So
like one of four is still crazy.
yeah, so that's a huge change. And of course, that's reflected in the students as well.
Mhm.
And everyone knows that the universities now, there's, more women than men for sure. And among my colleagues here in the department now, there's three of us doing geology. And then we have
That's amazing.
a woman who does environmental science as well. So it used to be very much a male dominated world, and that's changed, and that's a
Mhm.
good thing, of course. I like to think I maybe played a tiny
Yes, you did.
role in
Yes, you did. I'm sure
in
you
that.
played for me.
And
Yeah, for
so
sure.
to just kind of be a obvious role model, I guess.
Mhm.
On the science side, yeah, things have really moved ahead. I mean, we know so much more. When I started out, nobody ever talked about plate tectonics. It was just a new thing coming along. The whole idea of
Crazy.
continents moving was something that a few nutty people had proposed and was kind of meh.
Yeah.
And so I watched all that happen, and it's been for me a really exciting experience. And I bought into it right away. When I went to
Mhm.
University of British Columbia to start graduate work, I had never heard of plate tectonics. That was 1968.
That's
And a
crazy.
new faculty member had arrived, and he knew a lot about it because he
Mm.
had been working on ships and knew about plate tectonics and so on. And I just switched over, switched
I love
supervisors,
it.
changed
Yeah.
my whole career path because of that.
Plate
So it
tectonics.
was a matter of being in the right place at the right time, and that just really changed how my life turned out. And now, when I first started out, to do a chemical analysis of a rock was a huge job and
Yeah.
awful and almost impossible. You couldn't analyze for things that were present in small amounts in rocks, and now you can.
Yeah, like a spectrometer is amazing. Some of the technology in the like lab equipment has just blown away what you can
Yes,
do for how accessible it is, how cheap it is, how
yes.
not dangerous it is. It used to be super dangerous to
Oh my
process all
gosh,
these
yes.
chemicals.
Working with the hydrofluoric acid. Oh my goodness, yes. And also geochronology, dating
Mm,
rocks, determining the ages of rocks. When I first came to Nova Scotia, there were not any absolute ages of rocks. We knew some
whoa.
were older, some were
Yeah.
younger, but to actually pin a number, and now it's easy to do that. It's,
Yeah.
yeah.
It kind of makes sense, but it's also something so not my experience. I'm like, what do you mean you can't look at that zircon? What do you mean you didn't know plate tectonics? Like it's almost like we're so lucky and privileged, and we didn't even realize of like how accessible that information. I couldn't imagine growing up in geology not knowing about plate tectonics or being able to date things. Some of these fundamentals that we take for granted, right?
Yeah, that's a really big change. And, quite honestly, it's the reason why I'm still working
Yeah.
because I've been going back and redoing a lot of things that I
Oh,
did
cool.
before
Yeah.
and revisiting them, and,
Hmm.
and figuring things out. So the last 10 years for me have been incredibly rewarding. And those are 10 years when I would have been retired. Had I was
Hmm.
so lucky because they changed the required retirement age
Okay.
2 years before I turned 65.
Oh,
And so
amazing.
I feel that the best, and for me, the most rewarding scientific work that I've done has been in the 12 years it's been that since I would have retired.
Yeah. That's fantastic. That's
It
really cool
is.
to
So
see.
things
That's
like that.
different. Yeah.
I mean, making people retire at 65 and so on, sure, some people want to,
Yeah.
and
Sandra, I
that's
don't think
fine.
anyone can make you retire. I feel like it's just not going to be a thing.
Well,
I
I
don't
still
think
have
that's for you.
well, yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see. But I mean, really, it's, I feel I've been so fortunate in the timing of things in my life, for
Mm.
sure, because
Oh, I
I
love that.
watched all that happen, and it gives you a perspective that's quite unique
I could
for me,
imagine that.
for sure.
And I think it's also a testament too. I don't think many other people would have. I don't like. Yes, you were in the right place at the right time, but I also think a lot of people would have been like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, whatever. Glomar Challenger doesn't matter." And you were the one that was like, "This is gonna be big. Plate tectonics is about to rock
Yeah.
our whole world." So that's a testament to you. And if I could ask another kind of like lofty question, is like to take that further of like, where do you think it's gonna go? Where do you think the next kind of steps or the next future are gonna go in geoscientists? Like, what's
Oh,
is there something that excites you? Is there something that worries you? Where do you think we're headed?
well, obviously the
Yeah.
environmental awareness that people have now is a good thing, and obviously it makes people finally realize that the Earth is fundamentally controlling every minute of our lives, and we really need to know more about how those aspects of the Earth work. So I think the environmental side is certainly going to dominate in the geosciences going forward. I mean, that's a tremendous change
Mm-hmm.
that I've seen. We were a Department of Geology, then we became a Department of
Environmental
Earth and
science.
Environmental
Yeah.
Science. And so we're still doing geology and we're doing environmental science. I think one of the strengths we have here in this program is that we really are doing both. And so students come out with a good awareness of the earth science side of it as well as the environmental
Mm-hmm.
science side of it. So I think there's exciting things to be done in the future, and things like climate change and so on. Yeah, we're not going to stop climate change.
No, it's a
Obviously, the
natural
Earth's
system.
climate has
Yeah.
been changing
Yes.
forever,
Yeah.
but it's very important that people are aware of the impacts of
Mhm.
this and are trying to come
To
to
minimize it and to
grips, to
try to stop
minimize, yes,
to
to
minimize
mitigate.
kind of like our natural what we're adding to it. We don't need to super speed it, which is what we've been doing for years and years and years. Like we've taken a natural system and we've really put it on steroids. So to
And
learn
they've
how to
really
mitigate it.
and ignored,
Hmm.
and geoscientists, of course, have been saying this for a long time, but nobody has started listening till most recently. So I think there's a huge role for geoscience going
In the
forward,
future.
a bigger role than in the past, I hope. And that's exciting for sure.
No, I agree. And maybe on that, is there something that you think that the public should be more aware of?
Yeah, I think people have a hard time understanding geoscience, because it's something so foreign to how they think about their lives and
Like the
the
time scale of
environment
it.
around them. The
Yeah.
focus is so much on plants and animals,
Yeah.
and so little on what supports all those
What
plants
drives
and
all those plants
animals.
and animals? Yes.
And people do need to know more so that better decisions can be made by politicians, so that people can support people with rational and realistic ideas and so on. So I think ignorance is not a good thing. I would like to see people have a somewhat better understanding of the earth, and to recognize that changes can be made in how we live and how we
Hmm.
use things, and things can be better than they are, but you need some knowledge to do that. I mean, geology is so maligned. We're all visioned as, we're the people that mine And
Hmm.
very few geologists do mining,
No,
and
it's a
that isn't what
portion
we
of
do.
no.
And
Yeah.
we don't cause natural disasters. Volcanoes don't erupt because we're studying them, but people
Mm-mm.
tend to blame geoscience for a lot of things that are not really controllable. Yeah,
I
people need to be able to know what's a myth and what's reality,
Yeah,
I
I think
guess.
that's a good kind of good way to
Yeah.
say it, of just like basic understanding. I think you are right. It's a hard one to wrap your mind around, because I think it is a time scale problem. Like when a
Yes.
100 years seems like a lot, and you're like, okay, well, hold on to your boots because like we've been here for a lot longer than 100 years. So I think
I
some of it's
know.
like time
It
scale
is
and
hard
big
to
picture and movement. I think that's hard to explain to the general public
it's
sometimes.
very hard for sure.
Yeah. But it gives you your levers, and you need to know your levers. Like with climate, I think everyone needs to kind of understand a little basic oceanography and how oceans work to be able to
Oh,
understand
yes.
climate, right? Like that has to be like a fundamental understanding. And I think right now that's not part of the conversation at all.
No.
And I couldn't agree more that we need basic understanding of geoscience. And I think sometimes we do get the reputation of being like pro mining and pro like natural resources and not stewards of the environment, where you're like,
Yeah.
most of us are stewards of the
Are
environment.
stewards of the environment. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I certainly am.
Yes.
And we're in the best position to do that because we understand
The system. And
how
even
the
those
earth
in
works.
mining are still stewards of the environment, because we still need natural resources. Everything comes from natural resources, and you need to be able to take them in a responsible, sustainable way. So like
Exactly.
that's the role of natural science, even in that profession, is still an environmental steward or a resource steward kind of role. So
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
to wrap us up, and thank you just so much for your time and for being on this interview. I really appreciate it. And one thing that I kind of wanted to end with is, it might be a corny cheeseball question, but it's what inspires you and what has been your motivation throughout your career. And maybe we've already talked about it. Maybe it's discovery and finding puzzle pieces, but
Yeah, I guess I'm inspired by what I see in the natural world around me. I'm motivated by the work of others. I read, I listen to speakers at conferences, and just by questions students ask me and so on motivates me. And one thing leads to another, and there's always something new to do.
mm.
And, even rocks that have been sitting around in my office here for decades, and I suddenly look and say, oh, I should really look at the age of that rock because I don't really know what it is. And it'll help me to
Hmm.
figure, I guess it's just the way I am. Other people, my colleagues here, the people I work with from other institutions and so on, I mean, we all kind of feed off each other.
Hmm.
People who share my passion, I guess
Yeah.
is the word, for not rocks exactly, but for understanding the earth. And
Yeah.
geology isn't really all about rocks. It's
No.
rocks are just a tool really to help
Yeah.
or they're the record. They're the
Yeah, they're
pages of
what's
the
left
book
over,
or
exactly, of like the
yeah,
actual
yeah,
process and the actual system
yeah.
of the
And the
planet.
other thing about me that is kind of weird, I guess, my mother always told me it was anyway, that I don't really have any other interests or hobbies
Mm.
or anything. My work is me,
Yeah,
and
it's what you love.
I'm completely happy with that. So people ask me, "What are you going to do after you retire?" Well, same thing.
Yeah, I'm still gonna look at rocks. I'm still coming into the department. You're not
Yeah.
taking that key card away from me. I'm gonna zap them in the lab.
Why would I? Why would I do anything else? I'm not
Yeah.
really finished.
Sandra, that's a gorgeous answer. I love that. And I love that it's been a lifetime of like passion. I feel like passion's almost too small of a word, but it's been, yeah, a lifetime of motivation from other people, from discovery, from new things that you've seen or looked at, and then just like this kind of constant retuning with new
Yeah.
techniques, new like ideas, new lab processes to kind of discover more out of rocks that you took 20 years ago, to be like, yeah,
Yeah,
there's
that's
probably still some
amazing, isn't it?
information.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's as I say, as long as I'm still mobile and my brain still works, then
uh,
there's things you have no control over. And I repeat
mhm.
again, I feel I've been very very lucky, very fortunate.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
no
No.
regrets, I guess, or well, a few, but not too many.
But nothing too crazy. No, I love it. Absolutely love it. Sandra, thank you so much for talking with us today. I really appreciate it. It was so nice to see you again. And again, this one meant so much to me because like I said, you walked in day one of intro to geology. You and Pierre Poufal were the two people that got me into geology.
Uh,
And Pierre got me from a paleontology class and he was like, Alexis, I think you'll like it. I think it'll be like biology. Just step into the room. And I was like, no, I'm gonna hate it. I'm not gonna like it. And then you walked in and I was like, oh, I'm gonna like it. It's fine. I'm like,
uh,
really.
well, that's really good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah,
Makes
you're
me feel
welcome.
it's all been really worthwhile.
Oh, well, that's an honor. And it's an honor to have you on the show because it's a true story. It really is. Like, you walked in and I was like, yeah, cool. This is it. You're a geologist now. So it means so much. It means the world. Thank you so much for coming out on the show. I really
You're
appreciate
entirely welcome.
it. Okay, guys. Well,
It's been
thank you for
fun.
listening. I'm happy you had fun. I'm happy you enjoyed yourself. Um, Thank you for listening, guys. This is the Smoko podcast. We will see you next week. Thank you very much. Bye bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.